What's up, guys? I just wanted to get on here and make a short update video on a peace deal. Some news just came out about this peace deal that's been delayed for the last couple years. Netanyahu and Gantz go to Washington reportedly ahead of the peace plan unveiling. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Blue and White Chair Benny Gantz will go to the White House next week for an update on U.S. President Donald Trump's Israeli-Palestinian peace plan. U.S. Vice President Mike Pence said Thursday evening during a meeting with Netanyahu in Jerusalem. The political rivals, Netanyahu and Gantz, will fly to Washington on Tuesday. It's only a couple days away. The White House confirmed. The same day as a Knesset plenum vote to establish the committee that will weigh Netanyahu's request for parliamentary immunity from graft charges. Netanyahu met Pence and David Friedman, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Thursday evening at the American Embassy in Jerusalem. We just completed a conversation about plans for next week. President Trump asked me to extend an invitation, and this is Mike Pence speaking, to extend an invitation to Prime Minister Netanyahu to come to the White House next week for talks on regional issues, including peace. Pence said alongside with the Prime Minister Thursday night. The plan will be unveiled next week and is the most generous U.S. proposal ever for Israel, an unsourced Channel 12 report said, likely providing for Israeli sovereignty over all West Bank settlements alongside a recognition of Palestinian statehood. So if there's a Palestinian state, that means they're dividing the land of Israel, even if they say they're not, even if they use the language to say that they're not going to divide the land. If they're recognizing a Palestinian state in a land that God gave to Israel in 1967 in the 6-Day War, then it's dividing the land of Israel. The peace plan leaks. We're talking about basically dividing Jerusalem. Let's look at this article here. They say they're not dividing Jerusalem, but they're going to have a Palestinian section and an Israeli section, and Israelis can't buy the Palestinian homes. Trump's peace plan: Jerusalem will be under Israeli sovereignty. The United States and Israel are strong partners, and the Prime Minister's visit is an opportunity to discuss our shared regional and national security interests. The White House is expected to publish the details of the deal of the century next week in Washington. Preliminary reports Thursday indicated that the plan would give Israel sovereignty over the Jordan Valley and all the settlements, and formalize Israeli control over Jerusalem. At a meeting at the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem Thursday evening, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence invited Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Blue and White leader Benny Gantz to Washington to discuss regional issues, as well as the prospect of peace in the Holy Land. meeting will take place January 28th. We've had no better friend than President Trump, Netanyahu said following the invitation. That friendship is expressed in the fact that we're in the American embassy in Jerusalem, that Jerusalem was recognized by President Trump as Israel's capital, that President Trump has recognized Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights. And now with this invitation, I think that the president is seeking to give Israel peace and security. The peace and security that it deserves. What does the Bible say about peace and security? This translation says safety, but while they are saying peace and safety, then destruction will come upon them suddenly, like labor pains upon a woman with child, and they will not escape. But as you see right here, while people are saying peace and security, for when they say peace and security, then sudden destruction comes upon them as labor pains. I think that the president is seeking to give Israel peace and security, the peace and security that it deserves. So I gladly accept your invitation. Sorry, my screen just jumped and reset. One sec. So I gladly accept your invitation. His invitation to come to Washington and discuss with him his ideas on how to advance peace and to work closely with him to advance that goal, the Prime Minister continued. With such friends in the White House, with such backing from the United States, we should get as broad a consensus as possible around the efforts to achieve security and peace. Peace and security for the state of Israel. According to CAN News, the U.S. plan allows for Israeli sovereignty over the Jordan Valley and settlements in Area C. It also allows for a demilitarized Palestinian state. So if there's a Palestinian state, that means they're dividing the land of Israel. And if they divide the land of Israel, the Bible tells us they're going to divide the land of Israel. Joel 3 verses 1 and 2 says, "For behold, in those days and at that time, when I restore the fortunes of Judah," which is modern day, which is the Israelites, the Jews, restore the fortunes of Judah and Jerusalem, which happened in 1948 and 1967, respectively, 1948, 1967. "I will gather all the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. Then I will enter into judgment with them there, on behalf of my people and my inheritance, Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations, and they have divided my land." And what happens when the land is divided? First off, see, what is the dividing of the land? I believe it's the breaking. I believe it's what's spoken of as the breaking of the everlasting covenant. God made a covenant with Abraham to give him the land of Canaan and to him and his descendants through Isaac and through Jacob for an everlasting possession. And he gave them that back. The descendants of Abraham, the descendants of Jacob, the Jews, restored Judah and Jerusalem. So when they divide the land, as it says right here, that they will divide the land, I believe that's the breaking of this everlasting covenant. And what happens when the everlasting covenant is broken? Isaiah 24, 1 through 6. Behold, the Lord lays the earth waste, devastates it, distorts its surface, and scatters its inhabitants. And the people will be like the priest, the servant like the master, the maid like her mistress, the buyer like the seller, the lender like the borrower, the creditor like the debtor. The earth will be completely laid waste and completely despoiled, for the Lord has spoken his word. The earth mourns and withers, the world fades and withers. The exalted of the people of the earth fade away. The earth is also polluted by its inhabitants, for they transgressed laws, violated statutes, broke the everlasting covenant. And as a result, therefore, as a result of transgressing laws, violating statutes, which has been going on for a long time, they broke the everlasting covenant. Therefore, a curse devours the earth, and those who live in it are held guilty. Therefore, the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men are left. This is the same day as we see here in Ezekiel 38. This is the same day we see the coming of the Lord also here in Psalm 18. It's a day of the opening of the 7-seal scroll and the blowing of the first couple trumpets. While they are saying peace and safety, then destruction will come upon them suddenly, like labor pains upon a woman with child. Now, if you study into the labor pains thing, the labor pains, that's what's spoken of here in Revelation 12. And it's a reference to the resurrection. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. And she was with child, and she cried out, being in labor and in pain to give birth. And this sign appeared in the sky September 23rd, 2017, for the first time. So at the same time, we see another sign appeared in heaven, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads were 7 diadems or crowns. And his tail swept away a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, that when she gave birth, he might devour her child. And she gave birth to a son, a male child, who was to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up to God and to his throne. That's the resurrection and a rapture. At the same time, there's war in heaven, and the great dragon is thrown down. All this happens at once, and it happens while they are saying peace and safety. That's when destruction comes suddenly. And they are saying peace and safety. We also see it over here in Jeremiah 6, and also Jeremiah 8. They have healed the brokenness of my people superficially, saying, peace, peace, but there is no peace. We know that because when they're saying peace and safety, at the same time, that's when Israel is invaded. It's when Israel is invaded in the Gog-Magog war. And that's when Yeshua comes on the clouds. It will come about on that day when Gog comes up against the land of Israel, declares the Lord God. Then my fury will mount up in my anger, and in my zeal and in my blazing wrath I declare that on that day there will surely be a great earthquake in the land of Israel. The fish of the sea, the birds of the heavens, the beasts of the field, all creeping things that creep upon the earth, and all men who are on the face of the earth will shake at my presence. The mountains will also be thrown down, the steep pathways will collapse, and every wall will fall to the ground. That's the same earthquake as we see right here. Revelation 6, the sixth seal. I looked, and when he broke the sixth seal, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth made of hair, and the whole moon became like blood, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth, as a fig tree casts its unripe figs. That's interesting. When shaken by a great wind. This is that day, the great day of their wrath, of the wrath of the Lamb and the wrath of God, because they're both God. It begins with the opening of the seal, and it's a result of breaking the everlasting covenant, which is dividing the land. So it's looking like the time is here. It's looking like this peace deal is finally gonna be released. Let's all have on the full armor of God. If you don't know the Lord Jesus Christ, if you don't know Yeshua, if you don't have a relationship with God through the Son, Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ, if you don't know him, get to know him now. Read the Bible. Pray to God. There's no time left. We're out of time. The time is now. Repent. Turn to the God of the Bible, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. There's no time left. Turn to God now. And if you are a believer, stand strong in faith. Walk in the Spirit. Resist the devil. Deny the flesh. Allow God to work through you. The time is short. People need to be warned. The time is now. May God bless you guys.